How's it going, people? Salmonslabber here, and this is episode 5.2 of Runescape Lore. And today we're going to be covering Bandos, or at least his actions during the Third Age, and a bit of backstory, as Bandos was one of the more active gods during the Third Age, alongside Zamorak, Saradomin and Armadil. So, let's get into it then. So Bandos, also known as the Big High War God, and uncommonly referred to as the Sky Goblin by goblin kind. Bandos is the god of war. He is large and extremely powerful, very aggressive, egotistic, and manipulative. Bandos, having first set foot on Gielinor in the middle of the Gielinorian God Wars of Third Age, is the god of most races of the least intelligence, such as goblins, trolls, and ogres, and orcs. Though Bandos himself is actually of greater intellect. Some followers, mostly goblins, refer to him as the Big High War God. Until recently, Bandos was also completely forgotten by the humans of Gielinor due to his disappearance after the God Wars in the Third Age. Bandos, however, is rather large and strong, this fearsome appearance contributing to his prowess in battle. Bandos is immensely powerful, known for defeating many large armies by himself. His followers' main trait is strength, if not high numbers, although this does come at the cost of their intelligence, making them valuable warriors for Bandos. Bandos' previously neglected followers listen to him blindly, making him very capable of using them as pawns. Bandos does not usually care if most of his armies are wiped out, as he simply fights solely for the sake of battle. Although he may get extremely angry when everything doesn't go the way he wants, or when he is defied. Evidence of this is his struggles to reclaim the Dorgishan Goblin tribe for himself. So let's start off with a bit of backstory then. Much of Bandos' early history, including how he ascended to godhood, remains completely unknown. Considering his alignment though, it is entirely possible that Bandos, in a similar way to Tusker, may have travelled between dimensions looking for opportunities to fight, as it seems he has no permanent following, as he had to acquire one when he arrived to Gielinor. This arrival took place after the beginning of the Gielinorian God Wars in the early Third Age. Bandos was one of the most active fighters in the God Wars. When he arrived during the wars, he, according to Goblin religion at least, attempted to recruit many of the world's races to fight for him. These included the dwarfs, demons, elves, aviantes and humans, among many others, all of which refused, as these had already aligned themselves to many other gods who had already arrived within Gielinor. Eventually though, Bandos managed to recruit a number of followers, mainly consisting of various unintelligent but numerous and warlike races. He travelled to the prosperous realm of Uubos, where he promised the peaceful goblin kind living there strength and victory in the battle for their loyalty. And as such, all goblins left the realm in Bandos' service. He taught goblinkind metalwork and combat, and the goblins became Bandos' most numerous soldiers. Uubos, the goblin homeland realm, was a large and marshy, with massive mushrooms and other strange plants and structures covering the surface. Overall, Uubos was a very rich and fertile land. After Bandos convinced the goblins to come with him to Gielinor though, training them in the ways of combat and ultimately turning them into brutal and violent warriors, Uubos was destroyed by this war god. The once rich land was charred completely black, covering it in craters and poisoned sludge. By the end of Bandos' reign, it had become completely uninhabitable. The goblins though never knew of this. They fought for Bandos on Gielinor at the promise of returning to Uubos upon death. Soon he encountered other races on Uubos, such as the hobgoblins, ogres and orcs. all of these were actually initially peaceful and attempted to settle their conflicts with diplomacy rather than war. As Bandos took over, however, he forced them to resort to mindless violence on each occasion. So, how did Bandos manage Uubos then? Well, Bandos divided the races of Uubos into tribes, each to live separately. Gradually, all traces of the races once being united disappeared, and Uubos began to tremble with warfare. Bandos divided the goblins into 12 tribes, and organised them. These tribes were the Thorobshan, Akelishan, Garagoshan, Edithun, Ragashan, Naragoshan, Drogokishan, Dorgashan, Huzmugab, Horogothka, Saragorgak, and the Yurkolgok. He also created tribes for his other followers, although most of the names of these are unknown. He crossbred some of his followers, creating fearsome monstrosities such as Orgs, Rags, and Fergs. He led the Ogres as they conquered the area of the Feldip Hills, where they established their settlement, Gutanath, and brutally enslaved the peaceful Scavid race. At some point, Bandos also gained a relatively small number of human followers. Bandos ordered his troops to worship him. They built large structures in his honour. Only one of these, a throne room containing a battalion of statues and a massive throne upon which Bandos sat, remains today. The construction of these structures reveals exactly how manipulative Bandos was. For example, when the hobgoblins of the Thrashgagdak tribe built a magnificent statue of the finest resources on Uubos for Bandos, he simply dismissed it and ordered that the hobgoblins had to demolish the statue and smith weapons instead. The hobgoblins, upon hearing this order, simply obeyed. Meanwhile though, Bandos visited the orcs of the Veritark tribe and told them how each tribe was supposed to have a statue in his honour, before informing them that the Thrashgagdak had committed sacrilege by destroying their statue. He ordered the Veritark to assault the Thrashgagdak and eradicate them, but to keep the weapons they had already forged. Next, he proceeded to tell the ogres of the Azkrak-Thog tribe to perform an attack on the Veritark when they were recovering from their battle with the Thrashgagdak. He ordered them to create more weapons like the goblins had, or the hobgoblins had, to prove their worth in war. For example, they attacked the Org tribe of the Golthrolglorg, whom Bandos provided with the exact same weapons as the Azkrak-Thog, and berated them for attempting to settle the war rather than fight back. As such, Bandos was easily able to invoke massive battles amongst the once peaceful races of Uubos. At some point, he took all of his races to Gillinor, deeming them ready to fight for him. Uubos at this point was then abandoned, and Bandos destroyed it completely unbeknownst to his followers. He continued his manipulations on Gillinor. For an example, an orc by the name of Grador at one point became chief of his tribe after Bandos had encouraged him to challenge the previous chief in a dream. As Grador fought and won more and more battles, Bandos came to him once more and told him to go to a nearby town. This town Grador raided, and he used the large piles of gold he had found to bribe the goblins into following him soon after. Soon, Grador had control over most of the goblin tribes. When his money began to deplete, however, the goblins soon abandoned Grador, and he had to sell his armies to other gods to avoid defeat. He prayed to Bandos for aid, but this aid didn't come. General Grador was still one of the most powerful Bandosians and owned a massive army. Thus, Bandos had stopped supporting him, knowing that he was able to hold his own. So, what did Bandos do during the Third Age then? Well, during the God Wars, Bandos seemed to fight for the mere sake of battle. His allegiance was ever shifting, and his sole desire to revel in the bloodshed that threatened to destroy the world. While at times he fought alone, he is known to have ended alliances with Armadyl and Saradomin. This was merely so that he could win certain battles, and once these were over, he quickly turned against them. Pharynthi was one of the main sites where armies of Bandos battled, adding to the chaos and confusion of Saradomin and Zamorak forces, who were destroying the remnants of Zarus' empire at the time. Little of Bandos' major battles is known. Only his involvement in the battle for the God Swords has been revealed. When a flock of Aviantes were transporting the newly forged God Sword through the mountains of the Troll country, they were ambushed by Zamorakian demons and a battle ensued. When Bandos caught ear of this, Bandos sent forth an army of Rakashan goblins, ogres and orcs, led by Grador, to claim the sword in his name. As the battle grew between the Bandosians, Armadylians, Zamorakians and Saradominists, near the Temple of the Lost Ancients, the Zarosian Marjarar Sliske tricked a group of Saradominists into opening the ancient prison, releasing Nex and her armies. As Nex was simply immensely powerful, in fact too powerful to defeat, Bandos temporarily aligned with the other factions to re-imprison her, and participated in the ritual to freeze and seal the door. Bandos received one part of the key and entrusted it to a highly ranked soldier. The battle for the God Sword then continued, and Bandos' forces would fight valiantly. Eventually, a mysterious spell froze the entire dungeon and the combatants within. Only near the end of the Fifth Age did tectonic activity thaw them out. They still fight over the God Sword, oblivious to time. The goblins were the lowliest of Bandos' army, used primarily as skirmishers or scouts. Typically, vast numbers of goblins were sent into battle ahead of the ogres and orcs as a means of weakening and disorganizing the foe, or, in some cases, checking the water. The 12 tribes each had their own generals. These rose to power through combat, each slaying his successor in order to receive his rank. Bandos, unlike what his soldiers thought of their big high war god, did not care at all for his lower soldiers. Often the goblins were sent to their death to battles Bandos knew they had absolutely no chance of winning. On other occasions, different tribes would turn against each other, when they were either sold into service by Bandos, such as was the case with Hazamogab and the Saragorgak, whom he sold one to Zamorak and the other to Saradomin respectively, or were simply put into combat for Bandos' personal amusement. By the end of the wars, millions upon millions of goblins were eradicated. The Orgs, Thags and Rorgs had become extinct, except for Grador, who was still frozen within the God Wars dungeon. The Orcs had greatly diminished in number as well, virtually none to be found in Gielinor today. When the God Wars came to an end, and the Edicts of Guthix were put in place, Bandos left Gielinor. Although he still has a small but ever-growing group of followers, some goblins say he left for new plans. Others say he left because he was scared and could not make some of his followers fight. Neither of these are true, however, as Bandos had been banished along with all other gods thanks to the Edicts of Guthix and Guthix's actions towards the end of the Third Age. So, that was a nice bit of background story on Bandos up to about the Third Age, give or take. And we'll cover the rest of what Bandos does through the 4th, 5th and 6th Ages, but for now we'll stick to the Third Age. So with that said, I hope you all enjoyed that. Pretty interesting, nice bit of background info on Bandos and his actions during the time. So there we go then. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will catch you all later. Have a good one.